Back between two elevated boxes. This is not a very common obstacle to be seen on a trail class, although backing between poles or some other objects may be observed by a judge during a class. The one thing that a judge needs to take into consideration in evaluating this particular obstacle is the fact that the boxes are elevated and increase the degree of difficulty, perhaps also offering a safety issue which must be taken into consideration by the sharp edges of the boxes. There are three component parts that a judge must consider in this process. The first is the approach, and then maneuvering the horse into position to back. The second is the actual back between the obstacles, and the third is the departure from the obstacle, how smooth the horse turns and moves away from the obstacle. The one issue a judge must consider in evaluating this obstacle is the fact of safety. The boxes are elevated, the boxes have sharp edges, and we also need to take into consideration the fact that the surfaces on top of the boxes are sufficient to handle the weight and load of a horse should they accidentally step on it. So once these factors are taken into consideration, a judge can move forward with evaluating this obstacle. So now let's watch our demonstration horse perform this obstacle. The horse approaches the obstacle with a consistent, quiet speed, demonstrating control. The rider gets the horse into position quickly, quietly, and the horse backs with no resistance, smoothly, with a reasonable rapid footfall backwards, turns quietly to the left and departs the obstacle. This is a very good example on how to perform this obstacle, with the horse being quiet and willing. So now it's your turn to judge this class of horses backing through the elevated boxes. Here's the horse approaching the obstacle quietly, guides easily into position, yet showing some slight degree of resistance there. When asked to back, the horse just drops his head and starts moving backwards quietly, consistently, footfall after footfall. Makes a turn to the right quietly and departs the obstacle. We have a penalty score of 0, and we will give this horse a +1/2 in the maneuver score for the performance of this obstacle. Now we have horse number 2. You can tell by the physical demeanor and attitude of this horse from the beginning, with his ears looking forward and down at the elevated boxes, that there is some degree of curiosity here, certainly presenting a challenge to the rider. The horse is moving forward, backing up, showing resistance, certainly in an evasive manner. As the horse is asked to pivot and turn and back, the horse is continuing to show the evasiveness. The horse is actually backing off to the side, and we're going to call this a blatant disobedience, so our penalty score at this point would be a -5. Notice the rider's hands aren't even in a good position to demonstrate proper control over this horse, stepping up on the box, and then finally the horse relaxes, drops his head, backs through, turns, and then quietly walks away. This horse would then have an additional penalty score of -1 for stepping on the box, and a maneuver score of -1. So now we have horse number 3 approaching the obstacle. Transition downward is good. Horse is responding to the rider's aids to maneuver into position. Horse is starting to back, then steps forward, stops slightly. There's some degree of resistance here, and then the horse backs willingly and freely through the obstacle, turns and pivots and walks away. Overall, a very positive performance. Penalty score 0, and we'll give this horse a 0 on the maneuver score. You may have tended to rate this horse higher or score this horse higher, but you have to remember the fact there was a fair amount of hesitation and reluctance on this horse to start the back, but once the horse started, it moved forward. So now we have horse number 4. Like to see the hands of this rider a little bit lower. That's going to tell you the head position and the overall attitude of this horse to start with. Then we've got the horse backing freely, but not being guided well by the rider. Then steps off, touches with that right cannon the elevated box, and yet this horse continues to back through the obstacle. More of this is based upon the fact that we've got pilot error, if you will. And overall, we're going to give this horse a -2 penalty score, and we'll give it a -1 maneuver score, and most of that is being directed by the fact that the horse is not being guided properly by the rider. To give an overall assessment in this class, we started with the number 1 horse. This horse had a positive maneuver score and no penalty score, was very quiet, very willing, and should have been rewarded in that manner. We went with the number 3 horse, second in this class. This horse did show some degree of resistance, but was overall very positive in its performance. The third place horse was the number 4 horse in this class, because this horse in backing touched the boxes 2 times, earning 1 penalty point for each time the horse touched the elevated boxes. And then when we had the overall consideration for the maneuver score for this horse, we gave it a -1 maneuver score, giving us a total of -3. The number 2 horse places at the bottom of this class very easily when we consider all of the points that this horse accumulated. It had a -5 for the blatant disobedience, backing off to the side. Then it received a -1 score for touching the elevated box on the left side. And when we consider the overall attitude of the horse, we gave the horse a -1 maneuver score. Therefore, the total penalties were a -7, putting this horse at the bottom of the class.